We have a cut flower demonstration area at the USU Botanical Center located in Kaysville, and we've been playing around with this for the last couple of years. This last year we started to get kind of serious about it. So I'm going to show you what we're growing and how things are working for us. So this cut flower area is located in the Urban Farm Demonstration Garden. We installed the garden in 2018, and we started to think about implementing practices that would really aid our urban farmers, our organic growers, people who are growing in different systems in Utah on small acreage. We combined multiple crops in this area. So we don't just have cut flowers, but we have a very large vegetable area. We've got berries, we've got fruit trees, and we've even got a very small vineyard. And this is kind of an aerial shot, what it looks like from above. We are using multiple growing methods. So there is a high tunnel located in this garden. We're also using raised beds. We're using traditional in-ground plantings. And so we have kind of a mixed variety of everything going on in this garden. The entire garden is 1/8 of an acre. And the idea behind this was to see how much we could pack in and how much we could grow on 1/8 of an acre. And the cut flower area, you can see it's highlighted here in red. The cut flower acre is 0.016 of an acre. It's teeny tiny. It's about 700 square feet. And I'm going to show you what we've been able to grow and pull out of this very small area. The reason we added cut flowers to this area, as you guys know, you guys are cut flower growers interested in cut flowers. They are a high value crop. And they're a wonderful crop to add to a small scale farm because you can really pull some good value out of it, get some, some of your financial situation, like some of that income coming in, and it will boost your income a lot faster than some of the vegetables will. So it's a really good thing to add to a practice that maybe has a varied crop like vegetables and fruit, and you can add the cut flowers to it. And also, cut flowers are booming in Utah right now. It's something that is really popular. I see a lot of people that are very, very interested in growing cut flowers and in implementing some of these sustainable practices to have locally grown flowers, out in the community and doing good in the community and spreading joy in that way. So as a professor with USU Extension, it's important for me to understand the processes. So I wanted to make sure that I understood what was going on, what our growers were facing, what their challenges were, and to help identify some of these strategies to improve growing with cut flowers, and also help identify some of the more well-adapted cultivars that do well along the Wasatch Front. So as far as planting, we've done it a few different ways. Last year we did soil blocks. We seeded in 2-inch soil blocks. We used a 1-to-1 mix. We used fine compost with a really lightweight potting mix. And you can see the soil blocks here. I did have some concerns about this, and Dr. Stock and I are going to be working on this just a little bit. We're going to be looking at the pressure that's applied to the soil blocks as you create them. I have a hunch, because we had some that didn't do well being seeded in the soil blocks, and I have a hunch that maybe the pressure applied was too much, and so they were already dealing with compaction right off the bat as seedlings. So something to kind of consider and think about, and hopefully we'll have more answers about that this next year. As far as spacing goes with the flowers, because I'm working in such a small area, we use the minimal spacing recommendations. So a lot of the times you'll look up on a cut flower on the seed packet or in a book to see what your spacing should be. And we use the minimal recommended spacing, the minimum. So usually about 6 inches is our minimum. Sometimes it's 4 inches. It just depends on the plant and the final size of the plant. But because it is so small and we want to pack in as much as we can, we go with that minimum. We're also looking at row planting versus block planting. So the last 2 years we planted in rows, and I actually used the rows to help hold up the flowers and help create a support system without having to use the netting. So the last 2 years we have not supported with netting. Now this year we're going to switch to a block system where we have, flowers planted in squares. They will not be able to support each other, so we will use netting this year. I just kind of want to get a feel for the difference between the two systems and how we can do this. Now with running rows and having the plants support each other, I haven't seen a lot of problems with not straight stems. I do tend to plant in the rows. So we use wide rows that are about 3 to 4 feet wide. And I tend to plant the taller crops in the middle so that they can support the shorter crops on either side. So it's something to really kind of consider and think about. We'll see how that goes over the next couple of years. As far as irrigation goes, we have a specially designed system, and I know I'm showing you what it looks like in the vegetable area. The cut flower area is just to the right of these raised beds in these photos. But we're running a drip irrigation system, and you can see it better in these pictures than you can with the cut flowers. But we're running a type of drip called Netafim. It emits 0.9 gallons per hour. We have a 6-inch emitter spacing. So every 6 inches, I have an emitter that's putting out this amount of water every single hour. And then I have these in rows. You can see that the Netafim is in rows, and these are spaced 12 inches apart. And each one is connected to its own ball valve. So I can turn things on and off, which gives me some adaptability and flexibility in the garden, which is really important for, crop rotation and changing planting strategies. If I've got larger crops that maybe need a little more space and I don't need to have so much water there, I can definitely reduce that. Our soil in the garden is a sandy loam. It has about a 20% clay content, so it does hold moisture really well. So our watering schedule is about 2 to 3 times per week, depending on the heat outside, what our temperature is. So in the early spring, we'll start once a week. We work up to 2 times a week. And then, in the heat of the summer, we're 2 to 3 times a week, in July and August. Some of the problems that we've run into in this garden, 2019, we had a very prolonged, cold, wet spring, and we dealt with some establishment problems. It was really hard to get the flowers in and going and growing because we had so much water, and that's so odd for us in Utah. And it did delay our harvest a little bit. It was our first year planting in this garden, so we didn't take a lot of data in 2019. We just kind of wanted to wrap our heads around the processes that needed to happen. And then in 2020, we started taking data. And of course, we had another problem that showed up, and that was earwigs. We had a massive earwig infection in 2020. We did all of the cultural controls, everything that we could think of before we turned to chemical control, but we ended up having to turn to a chemical control schedule where roughly every 3 weeks we were spraying just to keep the earwig population down. And I'm hoping that we don't run into these same problems this next year. We ended up rotating chemicals. One of the things you'll find in horticulture is we never want to use the same chemical over and over again. We started with spinosad. We ended up having to use 7, even though I really don't like using that on flowers because of the bee populations that visit. But we did end up having to use it here and there. So we were rotating about every 6 weeks. We would hit it with 7, and every 6 weeks it would be spinosad. So back and forth every 3 weeks. So these are some of the flowers that we were growing. These are the ones that kind of rocked the garden. These are the ones I'm really impressed with. Of course, our Snapdragons. We grew 2 varieties of Snapdragons, Chantilly and the Madam Butterfly series. As you know, the Madam Butterflies are these double ruffled, absolutely gorgeous Snapdragons. We had a peak harvest around July 8th, and I did not succession plant these. I kind of wanted to see what my harvest date was to begin with. And then this year, we're going to definitely be succession planting to kind of spread that season out. We had about 30 plants. You can see that our yields were, well over 300 stems. We did really well as far as the yields went. Chantilly came on slightly earlier, but I was really impressed with the long, sturdy stems in these varieties. And that's something that's a common variety. You guys probably do grow that and have some really good experience with that one. The chocolate lace flower, if you are not growing this flower, this is a wonderful flower to add as a filler. I have been very impressed with this. It puts out a lot of harvestable stems in multiple colors. So you can get the dark purple, the light purple, sometimes it comes up white, and it is prolific. You do not need very many plants to get an incredible amount of flowers out of it. So we harvest this when the heads are fully open and laying flat. One thing I've noticed is if you harvest a little earlier when the heads are curled slightly, like what you see in this picture here and there, they will wilt. So they are very prone to wilt. They don't tolerate the heat well at all either. So early morning harvest and get them cooled. Globe Amaranth, we ran the sunset mix, which I've been incredibly impressed with. So that one has colors in purple and orange and red. It's just a beautiful jewel toned mix. You can see our peak harvest was early July, an incredible harvest out of this plant, very prolific, 570 stems out of 25 plants. They are tough, they handle the heat well, and such a long vase life. I have been incredibly impressed with that plant. Amaranth is one that is, very sought after. It gets a higher price at market. It's a beautiful kind of unusual look. We grew two varieties. We've grown the Opipo and we've grown the Coral Fountain. My experience with the Opipo is that it has been much shorter. It has not produced the length and the height that I get from the Coral Fountain. Our peak harvests were in July again. It's very prolific again, 166 stems from about 20 plants, and this readily reseeds. So I allowed this to reseed from 2019 along this fence line and didn't even have to plant it again. It does very well. I did notice an incredible amount of earwig damage in the Opipo, and that's because it is so close to the ground. It never really got the height that it needed so that the earwigs wouldn't attack it. Zinnias, of course, are wonderful. We grew the Oklahoma Sunset. Peak harvest was late July. Incredible amount of flowers that we were able to harvest off of these plants. And the stem length in this variety was just so nice, so long, so easy to work with. I did notice as the harvest season went on that our bloom size did start to deteriorate and we got a little bit smaller with those bloom sizes, but again, considerable earwig damage in this crop. We were battling earwigs specifically in the zinnias for quite a while. The black-eyed Susans, if you have not explored the black-eyed Susans, I would highly recommend that you do. There are two varieties that we grew this last year. The Cherry Brandy is the darker colored one, and then the Chim Chimney, you can see, it kind of looks like a chimney sweep. It is so much fun. If you harvest it early, the petals are not fully unfurled and it really does look like a chimney sweep. So it's unique in that sense. This one I'm highly allergic to, and I don't know if other people are, but when I harvest this, I get blisters all over my hands. So make sure that you're using gloves with this one if you have sensitive skin. A longer vase life, 7 to 10 days. It can be a dirty flower. So it's one of those that we would add a couple drops of bleach to the water. We did see some herbicide damage. We had a technician here at the USU Botanical Center that was really spray happy, and he sprayed on a windy day, and this one was very subject to the herbicide damage. So we did have some crooked stems that were not harvestable, or they were harvestable, but they weren't marketable, I should say. And then the sunflower. We have grown the Pro Cut series for the last couple of years, and I have been incredibly impressed with this type of sunflower. It is a single bloomer. You don't need to pinch it. If you do pinch it, you end up with really small heads. Something that you should succession plant. Sorry, I've been talking for too long today. And we've grown the plum, we've grown the white, we've grown the red. All of them are just absolutely beautiful. One of the things about this, that you're probably familiar with, you want to harvest it before those leaves or those petals unfurl, because they do have a tendency to shatter once those unfurl. But we got 18 stems from 8 plants. We didn't plant it heavy this last year, but we will be planting much more of this this next year. Okay, flowers that I have high hopes for. There were some things about these flowers that maybe, could have been improved. The Clary Sage, if you have not grown Clary Sage, it is a fantastic flower. We grew the Clary mix, which comes in shades of pink and dark blue, kind of purple and white. And you can see it here. It's absolutely stunning, and it will flower. You can see the flowers. And then the bracts, the little leaves around the flowers, are actually what color. So you want it to flower, and then you're going to harvest, and you're going to strip the stems as you harvest. An extremely long vase life, greater than 10 days. This one I would definitely recommend succession planting. We did not, and we had an incredible, massive harvest all at once. But if you were to succession plant this would do really well. It does readily reseed. I was talking to the USU Extension weed specialist, and he is recommending that this plant be put on the noxious weed list, which means we probably wouldn't be able to grow it as a cut flower. So we did have a pretty serious conversation about it, and I think he has changed his mind about putting it on the noxious weed list because of the economic value of cut flowers in Utah. But a great variety to grow nonetheless. Yarrow, you can see that here behind the zinnias, we grew the summer berries mix. So again, we get a mix of colors. We got 84 stems from 20 plants, not the greatest harvest. It is a perennial. I'm wondering if our subsequent harvests of this plant in years after the plant has become established in the first year might be better. That's something I'm looking at to see if that changes as the plant ages. A little bit shorter vase life, but the colors are beautiful, and I have high hopes for it. Cosmos, again, a very common flower to grow. Our peak harvest was mid-July. We did get a really good harvest off of this plant, 301 stems from 30 plants, but we did notice a lot of earwig damage, really subject to insect problems. And we had some flowers that could shatter. If you don't harvest it at just the right time, those petals fall off, and they just don't tolerate the heat very well. We did end up using some of the foliage as a filler, and that is another option for use of Cosmos. Strawflower, we grew the apricot mix. This is an absolutely beautiful flower. I love this plant. Just the yields were not what I hoped to see. So we had about 132 stems from 25 plants. Our peak harvest was late July. It is very heat tolerant. And the stems on this are exceptionally long. So I was able to really pull a good 18-inch stem off of these plants, which was fantastic. They do not do well in the prolonged cold, wet spring weather, was what we learned in 2019. We had a much better year with this plant in 2020. So it does not like that cold, wet weather. Celosia, this is a beautiful plant. It did incredibly well in 2019 for us. We harvested just beautiful sized flowers off of this plant, an incredible array of colors in the Supercrest mix. But in 2020, we had just a terrible harvest. We harvested 28 stems from 5 plants. So I'm seeing this variability in our harvest yield and potential, which makes me think that, with a little tweaking, this plant could be consistently a great plant to grow and to harvest from. It's just, we've got to kind of wrap our heads around growing it successfully year after year. So yeah, something to consider. And then this is one that we grew that was kind of unexpected. We used rosemary as a filler. We used a perennial variety called ARP, and it puts on a good amount of growth every single year. The stems are sturdy, and it adds some aroma that is a little bit different to your bouquets or whatever you're creating or selling to florists. But it was a wonderful addition and just kind of a surprising thing that we found worked really well in our cut flower situation. So flowers that should not quit their day jobs. These flowers should just focus on being pretty and not being cut flowers, in my opinion, at this point. Calendula, we grew this one last year. Our peak harvest was around July 8th. We got 85 stems from 15 plants, not great. The stems were sticky and the stem length was really short. So this is one I don't know if I will grow again. I don't know that we'll explore it again. Really short vase life, and it's beautiful. I just don't know if it's worth the space in the garden. When I'm dealing with such a small space, it's got to have a really big bang for its buck in my mind. So it's one of those that I'm just not sold on. Tickseed is another one that I wasn't sold on, sometimes called Coreopsis. We grew the incredible cultivar, which came from Floret Flower Farms. Our peak harvest was July 13th. We got 88 stems from 20 plants, so not incredible on our harvest, but the shattering was intense. Every time that I harvested this, it didn't matter if I harvested them when they were not open, or if they were fully open, or if they were partially open. We had shattering, and it was heartbreaking to see these beautiful flowers just fall apart before we could even get them into a cooler. So we ended up using the fine leaves as a filler. You make lemonade out of lemons, I guess, but shorter vase life, even with the foliage as a filler. So not a great cut flower in my mind. And then Feverfew, we grew the Vigmo snowball, which has multiple layers of petals. So it does really have that snowball look. You can get a single row of petals as well in a different cultivar. We got about 40 stems from 6 plants. Now this is a perennial. We overwintered it. We're going to see how it does again this year, but it did have a really hard time establishing. This was one that really struggled establishing as a seedling. And this is where I'm starting to wonder if maybe we had too much pressure when we were creating those soil blocks. This one really had a tough time. But it had shorter stems this first year. We'll see this second year if it can elongate those stems and prove its worth as a cut flower. So these are our harvest dates. You can see that we've got kind of some variability here, and I did not succession plant anything this last year. So this year we're going to start looking at succession planting and seeing how we can change the season and elongate it. I just wanted a baseline for the Wasatch Front up in Davis County, so I knew where I was at. If I planted things according to, you know, the packet directions when they should be planted outside, what my harvest dates looked like. And you can see I've kind of got clusters here on harvest dates, and it ended up that we had three different kind of harvest peaks almost, and it was almost once a month. So we had at the very beginning of July, we had the end of July, and we had the beginning of August. And this is what it looks like when I kind of break it down. You can see this is kind of a mess here at the bottom, but you could see that I have flowers coming on, short duration. You know, with the Clary Sage, we kind of hit this peak harvest and then we're finished with it. Several of our plants did the same kind of thing. And then we've got, you can see these 3 peaks on our harvest here, just kind of going through the season. So when we looked at the crop value, our values were based on 2020 USDA pricing. You can see the number of stems again that we pulled off from each one of these types of plants. And our values, just this 0.016 of an acre, we were able to pull out $2,700 worth of harvestable stems. And that right there just kind of blows my mind, the incredible value that you can pull out of a very small space with these cut flowers. A couple of tips and tricks really quick. One of the things I do is I create a binder with all of my info for every single plant that I'm growing in that cut flower garden. It has all kinds of tips and tricks for myself: pinching, fertilization needs, growing and harvesting notes. I do a lot of research up front. It saves me a lot of heartache later and a lot of spending my time trying to figure out what I should be doing later when I already know what I should be doing. I keep it with my garden supplies in a shed right out by the garden, so it's very easy for me to access. That's one of the things that helps me really stay on top of everything. As far as value and donation, again, our flowers were all donated to Brightening Blooms in 2020. They created over 50 different arrangements from the flowers. You can see some of the arrangements here. They turned out just absolutely beautiful. And they've been actually used as a memory tool in some of the memory care facilities. I had one of those facilities contact me and ask for all of the plants that we're donating, all of the flowers, to be labeled, and they're using it as a way to enhance memory building skills for some of these different care facilities. So that was kind of a surprising impact that this garden has had. You can see again that there's that amaranth. It's absolutely gorgeous. This was for a girls' night out event that we do. We do these classes for women to try and get people interested in horticulture and to learn more about the USU Botanical Center. And this was a cake decorating night, but we had fresh flowers from our gardens there. And you can see just how beautiful and delightful they are to look at. So I know that we have a lot more research to do and a lot more to learn here, but that's just kind of a quick dip into what we're doing at the USU Botanical Center.
Few questions to start off with. Can you, so we're launching a poll. Please fill out this evaluation of Sheridan's talk. Thanks so much to everybody. One question, can you expound upon row versus block planting?
I can. So when we plant in rows, we're planting in long straight lines. When we're planting in blocks, we're maybe planting 3 rows across and 3 rows or 5 rows deep. So we're creating a block. Think about if you were to plant corn. A lot of people know that corn has to be cross-pollinated through the wind, so they plant it in a block instead of a single line. And that's what we're looking at. We're doing that single line versus that big square of the same plant.
Thank you. Did you have problems with, say, a 9-inch spaced plant with the 6-inch emitter? Some of the plants not getting enough water?
No, so those emitters, it's pretty cool how they work. And so I run them for a full hour. And one of the reasons why I run them for a full hour is to spread that moisture across a larger area in the soil surface and down below. So as it runs, of course, it's going to run right under the emitter first. And then you'll see that water start to spread out. So if we have a 6-inch spacing over that hour, it does fill from emitter to emitter, and it does fill that soil profile. So it's pretty incredible how the water moves through the soil.
Yeah. How did you get 18 stems from 8 plants of single stem sunflowers?
That is a good question. So we did see some side shoots coming off, and they were large enough that we could harvest. So they're considered single stem because you don't want to pinch them. Other varieties of sunflowers you pinch at 12 inches. These ones you do not. You allow them to create one single stem up the middle. And then if you're lucky, we got lucky and we had some of those side branching shoots that created large enough flowers with a large enough stem for us to harvest.
And that actually, I have a question about what were your stem lengths for when you were counting up the total stems per plant? Was that just every single stem that was harvested, or certain ones that were above a certain grade, a certain stem length?
Yeah, so they were harvestable. They were workable in an arrangement. And of course, that's going to vary between different types of flowers. So we were looking for the longest stems. So we did have a coal pile. Everything that couldn't be used got thrown in a coal pile. But this was everything that could have been sold or marketable to a florist or somebody to work with.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so I think we can fit 2 more questions in here. One's really quick. For the prices per stem that you shared, are those wholesale or retail prices?
That's the USDA market pricing. So I'm trying to remember if it is wholesale. I think it might be retail, I think. I know Megan's on here and it's the same pricing that she uses. I should be able to answer that question. I'm sorry. I'll find out and I'll put it in the comments.
Okay, and then last question, a quick squeeze in. Can you briefly discuss your fertility program?
Okay, so our fertility program is not very heavy at all. So I put down a little bit of 16, 16, 16 fertilizer at planting down underneath the plant when I plant it. And then I do not fertilize again unless I see that we need a little extra growth. And at that point, I will top dress with a little bit of 16, 16, 16 if needed. But
okay.
yeah.
Well, great. So